Some of the most influential artists in history lived inside their heads for long stretches of time. I've always wondered how much someone like Mobius must have drifted and how many worlds he explored internally before putting them on paper. Because I believe there is a deep connection between creativity and daydreaming. His work always feels less invented than discovered, as if he spent years walking through landscapes and deserts no one else could see yet. So in today's video I want to talk about the connection of creativity and daydreaming. And if you're new to my channel, please make sure to hit the subscribe button in order to support any future videos, and feel free to also hit the like button. Daydreaming isn't laziness. It's not distraction. It's a specific neurological state. When the mind drifts inward, a system called the default mode network becomes active. This network is heavily involved in imagination, autobiographical memory, future simulation, understanding other people, and narrative construction. In other words, the exact mental tools artists rely on. Neuroscience proved that this network lights up when we are not focused on the external world, but it doesn't shut down the brain. It does the opposite. It connects distant ideas. The psychologist Jerome Singer, one of the pioneers of daydreaming research, showed decades ago that people who engage in rich, imaginative thought often score higher in creativity, empathy, and problem solving. Later studies confirmed that spontaneous thought plays a major role in original idea generation. Daydreaming is the mind-running simulation without external pressure. That's why you, as an artist, gravitate toward it. Have you ever daydreamed? Is daydreaming a thing for you? Daydreaming also can become dangerous. Everyone wants to learn how to draw from imagination. And that is great, but how do you get there? How do you get to the world of imagination? It helps you to test ideas, emotions, identities. It lets you move freely through possibilities. But slowly, almost invisibly, it can begin to replace action instead of supporting it. And that is the part most people miss, because there is a fine line. You don't wake up one day and decide to escape into your head. You drift there because it feels efficient, safe, or even emotionally rewarding. So think about it. Have you ever rehearsed a conversation in your head with the perfect response, the perfect timing, the perfect outcome? The problem isn't imagination. It's that rehearsal begins to substitute experience. The nervous system gets the emotional signal of preparation without exposure to uncertainty. So real interaction starts to feel heavier, messier, and less controlled. But what does that has to do with artwork and creating artwork? There is something they call the second shift. The imagined success replaces effort. You picture finished work. The recognition you get when you show people the finished work. The moment when you post it on ArtStation on Instagram, people will like it and you feel good. Your brain responds as if progress has been made. Because dopamine doesn't clearly distinguish between imagined reward and real reward. This is where things quietly break. Because imagined success is cheaper than effort. It costs no rejection, no failure, and no friction. So the mind starts offering you the feeling of achievement without the work required to earn it. And once the loop forms, effort feels unnecessary and strangely disappointing. And this is the moment where either way you stop working, you continuously thinking, or you build a reason why you can't achieve what you actually want. In the third shift, the emotional needs move inward. So one of the most dangerous transitions happens when emotional fulfillment becomes internal. Instead of connection, feedback, intimacy, or recognition, you receive those feelings inside the fantasy. The brain doesn't care where relief comes from, only that it comes. So daydreams start compensating for unmet needs, not solving them or replacing them. So you have to understand that thinking about stuff, being in your imaginative world, isn't the problem. Losing time alone isn't the issue. Artists lose time all the time in the process. The difference is the trace behind. After productive creative focus, something remains. A sketch, a page, a structure, a decision, or maybe a small thumbnail. In destructive daydreaming though, time disappears without a trace. You return with nothing external, only the feint of exhaustion, having lived something that left no trace. And that exhaustion accumulates, because research consistently shows that excessive mind wandering correlates with lower mood or reduced life satisfaction. Not because of imagination is harmful, because the brain misattributes the progress. You feel like you've moved forward, right? And that is a problem of many YouTube videos. You have the feeling of, I learned something, or I think I've learned something. You sign up on a website and you take an online class. You watch all the videos and you think about it and you have the feeling of you learned something. But nothing in the external world confirms it, because the real work feels dull. Not because it lacks meaning, because it demands effort before reward. And once your brain gets used to the reward-first system, and reality feels uncooperative. In more extreme cases, psychologists describe maladaptive daydreaming, a pattern of immersive fantasy that becomes compulsive. So people who are constantly daydreaming. So daydreaming becomes like a mood management tool. Because they have stress, they drift. Because they're bored, they drift. They feel discomfort, they drift. And because it works in a short term, it's a very strong habit. And that's the problem. So if you're thinking about something that stresses you, something that is maybe boring but helpful on the long run, or maybe something that is completely new that you want to learn, but it makes you feel uncomfortable, you have to see if wandering through your thought is maybe a habit you have to break. And here's actually the big part why daydreaming and overthinking can be dangerous for creatives. For most people, this pattern is a distraction. For creatives, it's even worse, because imagination is already a part of your identity. You don't feel lazy, you don't feel disengaged, you feel active, right? You imagine stuff. You feel like something important is happening, and that's the real danger. You can feel productive without producing anything. And that is the dangerous part. The mind stays busy, the self-image stays intact, but the work never crosses the threshold into reality. If you don't put the pen down on paper and actually do the exercises, you won't progress. And that's when imagination stops being a gift and starts becoming something problematic. Okay, but I also want to tell you there is a pretty bright side of the concept of daydreaming, where artists actually keep finding gold inside the drift. And yet, this is where things get really interesting, because artists don't create despite daydreaming. They create because of it. Because daydreaming at its best is not passive. It's not really zoning out. It's more like a flow state. Most artists I know don't start with execution. They start by inhabiting something. A writer doesn't just outline a scene. They live inside of it. They think of it. They hear the rhythm of the dialogue before it's written. They feel where the tension drops, where the pause is needed, where something else feels false. And the page of the words come actually later. I would go that far where I say an illustrator doesn't necessarily invent an image line by line. In their mind, they rotate their idea. They test scale, lighting, atmosphere, composition. The drawing isn't discovery, it's a transcription. The interesting fact, the reason why I actually talk about daydreaming today is because daydreaming gives artists something that logic can't. Because daydreaming enables a mode of thinking that structured reasoning alone can't reach. You probably heard of pre-visualization. You don't just imagine what happens. You see how it feels. Artists can run emotional experience safely inside of their head. What if this character reacts with a silence instead of anger? You're testing resonance, not correctness. Because stories aren't built linear in the drift. They emerge as a system. This is why great narratives feel inevitable instead of mechanical. And also daydreaming is a natural compressed meaning into images, if you ask me. If I sit on my couch and I think about stuff, it doesn't cost me nothing. I can go down as deep as I want. If I don't want it, I can just throw it away. I can read about something and it can fire up an idea. I think we have to sustain the inner world at some point. The reason why many artists return to the same motifs, the same landscapes, the same obsession about drawing animal-like characters or faces, is because the work feels coherent and is sustained by the inner world. And it's not a momentary inspiration. I think Mobius didn't just draw science fiction. He lived inside of it. His worlds feel expansive, because they weren't assembled piece by piece. They were explored over time. The drawings feel like windows, not invention. And the same is true for artists like David Lynch, Hayao Miyazaki, or Salvador Dali. Their work doesn't feel random or decorative. It feels like something that came up by internal logic. Even when it's strange, it is still consistent. And that consistency comes from long-term imaginative habitation. They didn't visit ideas. The ideas stayed inside. And there's a distinction that matters more than talent. They extracted from their daydreams instead of living in them. They didn't confuse imagination with completion. They didn't mistake vivid inner experience for finished work. They treated daydreams like little mines, not homes. They went in, gathered minerals and everything that mattered, and came back with something that could exist in the real world. That's why their imagination didn't dissolve their discipline, it sharpened it. And that's the difference between drifting that creates art and drifting that replaces it. So I think the balance matters for artists. Creatives rely heavily on the default mode network. It's why ideas often come when attention is relaxed. When you walk, when you shower, when you're staring at the window. Again, Eminem has his best ideas on the toilet. But the same strength comes a liability when regulation weakens. When the executive system disengages too much, daydreaming loses structure. Thoughts don't resolve, they repeat. Okay, but let's talk about what happens when you feel like you have too many ideas, right? This is why some creatives don't feel empty, they feel overloaded. They don't lack ideas, they lack containment. When imagination produces faster than it's sharpened, the system jams. Nothing is selected, nothing is committed. The result feels like a blockage, but it's actually congestion. Too many possibilities, too few decisions. The brain becomes a cinema with no exit. So there is a subtle danger. You're thinking, you're feeling, you're imagining. The self-image of I'm a creative person stays intact. But creativity isn't defined by internal motion. It's defined by translation. The moment from inner experience to external form. Daydreaming is not a flaw in creative people. It's a powerful internal engine. But an engine that never meets the road doesn't move anything forward. It just burns fuel. So the question isn't whether you daydream. The question is whether your imagination serves your life or replaces it. I keep asking myself the same uncomfortable question. Am I using my inner world to build something real? Or am I hiding in it because reality demands more than I'm willing to give? If you're interested in learning more about this, I can recommend the book by Jerome Singer, The Inner World of Daydreaming. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. Take care. Bye bye.